And I'm live. Woohoo! That is a very bright background. I think that's just how it's going to have to be today. It's just going to have to be very, very bright. Okay, we have a couple of minutes for those of you who are joining in a little ahead of time. We have a couple of minutes. So, in terms of props for today, you could probably get away without any. But at one point, I'll be draping myself back over an incline. I'll use a couple of blocks for that, but you could use a big cushion or a bolster or a folded or rolled up blanket or towel. And it might be nice to have a blanket or towel anyway, just in case you want some padding under your chest or under your elbows or under your seat. So that's what I would suggest, something that you can drape back onto, a couple of blocks, a cushion, a couple of blankets or towels, and then you can use them for padding as well. And we're focusing today very much on the upper body, on the chest, the shoulders, the side ribs, the side waist. And I think you might be surprised by the impact that working on those regions can lead to. The impact that it can have on your breathing and your posture, your mood, your energy. Might sound a little bit croaky today. For some reason, I have a slightly froggy throat. Fingers crossed it's nothing sinister, but just a little bit of a frog in my throat that will hopefully go away. So feel free to jump into the chat and let me know what you're up to today, where you're joining in from, how you're feeling, what you're looking for in practice. No myofascial release today, just yin, pure and simple. And that's not always the way that I work with the shoulders. Often I find that they respond well to having a little bit of myofascial release first, especially if you're working with tissues that you're a little less familiar with. That myofascial release can just anchor your attention there, can kind of focus the energy of the central nervous system, and then the yin can be a little bit more effective after that. But for today, just yin, just the simplicity of yin, a little less technical thought, a little less procedure to follow. And hopefully, we'll have a different experience that we can lose ourselves in there. A little less than a minute before we get going. As always, the chat box is there. So if questions come up during, I won't be checking it during, but you're welcome to pop them in and I will circle back and have a look at the chat at the end. And of course, if you have to leave before we get to the chat, you can always contact me on social media to ask any questions that you might have. I'm always happy to offer my advice, although I may not have the answers. I'm happy to give you my thoughts. Well, we'll get started. Hi, I'm Rachel Land. Welcome to Yoga Medicine Online and welcome to your practice. In today's yin yoga practice, we are very much focusing on the upper body, the arms and shoulders, the chest and side ribs. And in terms of props, you could probably get away without having any. I'm always going to have a blanket or towel on hand just in case I want it for padding, and I will be using it today to pad from the bottom of my rib cage down to my frontal hip points. And then at one point in class, we'll take a rebound by draping back into a big open shape. I'll be setting myself up over my blocks when I do that. You might do that back over a folded or rolled blanket or towel or a big cushion, or you could just lie flat on your mat. Now, when you have what you need, we'll actually start seated upright, and you might be really comfortable sitting as you are. You could sit in a chair, or maybe you want to sit on a block or a blanket or towel. Take a moment to tilt your pelvis gently forward and back so that you can find your way out of whatever habits you've been in so far today and find something a little closer to neutral. And then once you've found a central position for your weight on your sit bones, imagine settling the weight of the rib cage directly on top so that it's not kind of flaring forward of the pelvis. It's not rounding back, but there's this sense of you kind of setting the weight directly on top, letting your shoulder blades then rest on the back ribs and the weight of the head find a central position too, so that you're not aware of your chin falling forward but you're not aggressively pulling it back. There's just this central channel of the spine holding you pretty effortlessly upright. Now, feel free to close your eyes if that helps you to pay attention. You could also keep your eyes open and let your top eyelids drift down so that you have a broad, soft gaze. Let your lower body settle and bring your attention to your upper body. Feel your breath coming and going in the front, side, and back ribs. And feel how the influence of the breath changes the tensioning system around your collarbones and your shoulder blades. Notice the pace, the depth, and the texture and quality of your breathing. Gathering as much information as you can so that you start off with a sort of snapshot of how it feels to breathe into your body. But we can circle back to for comparison at the end of practice. We're going to sprinkle a little bit of yang in amongst the yin postures today, and we'll start with that little bit of energy and movement. So blink your eyes open or refocus your gaze. Maintain your upright seat, but bring your arms out in front of you. Take a loose interlace through your fingers and have your elbows wide as if your arms are encircling a giant in between your hands and your sternum. Now, as you breathe in, imagine trying to pull your elbows apart, kind of waking up this circle of tissue. And as you breathe out, flip the heels of the palms away from you, straighten your arms, and tuck your chin. Inhale to press your clasped hands overhead. You might even look up if that suits your neck. Exhale to release your arms and circle them way out wide. Feel your shoulder blades glide on your back ribs. Clasp your hands behind you. Inhale to shrug your shoulder blades back and down. Puff up your chest. Exhale to release. We'll do that a couple more times. Inhale to pull the elbows wide. Exhale to push your hands forward. Shoulder blades wrap around the side ribs. Inhale to reach your arms high. Exhale to release. Interlace your hands behind you. Inhale to shrug back and down. And exhale to release. Two more rounds. See if you can interlace your fingers the opposite way, the weird way. Inhale, elbows wide. Exhale, hands forward. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale to release and circle out wide. You might start to feel a little warmth building. Inhale to shrug back and down. Exhale to release. Last time with that awkward interlace. Inhale, elbows wide. Exhale, heels of the palms forward. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale to drift out wide, hands clasp one last time. Inhale to shrug back and down. And exhale to release. Give your shoulders a little roll. You could turn your head from side to side. You might have gathered a little information from the upper body already. And then come off any props or any seat. Come through hands and knees. Take your knees a little wider than your hips, maybe out even toward mat width, and then start to lean your hips back towards your heels. Now, I'll let you decide how far back they go. You could keep your hips a little elevated into puppy. You could curl your hips back towards your heels in something closer to child's. We're just looking for the hips to act as a counterweight for the left arm as the left fingertips stretch forward. Now, you'd have the right hand anywhere you like. For me, it makes sense to bend my right elbow and use my hand or fist as a cushion for the head. Now, we're looking for a shape that you can be in for at least a couple of minutes. So it doesn't have to be your deepest possible stretch, but you are looking for a sense of the left side ribs fanning apart and a little bit of length over the outside of the armpit. And if you're not feeling it in your one-sided puppy or extended child's pose, you might start to walk your head and your left hand over toward the right. So there's a slight side bend here, the left side of the torso a little longer than the right side. Now, you're welcome to let your left elbow soften down to rest on the floor. And if you're feeling any sense of pinch or compression between the left upper arm and the left side of the neck, you might turn your palm in toward the midline or take your arm a little wider from your ear and temple. And then once you find a shape you think you can work with, settle into stillness. Outward stillness at least. Notice how the internal movement of the breath, especially in the left lung, continues. A sense of you perhaps expanding into the space that you've created with each breath in, and feeling the release and the rebound as you breathe out. Head resting heavy on your right hand or a prop or the floor. And exerting the least effort possible to find that sense of space or reach through the left side. Take your last couple of breaths here. And if you walked your torso over to the right, ease your torso back to center. Use your right hand underneath you to help you back up to something approaching all fours. And then drive down through your right hand and float that left arm up toward the ceiling. Take a breath in there, broadening out across your collarbones, reawakening some strength in that left arm. And then swoop it through behind the right, back of the hand sliding along the floor behind your right until your shoulder or your head come down to tap or brush. Now we'll do that a couple more times. Inhale as you drive down through the right hand and sweep up through the left. Exhale as you sweep that left arm through. Two more rounds. And one last round. Now, in this final round, we're going to stay with some semblance of this thread the needle position through the left arm. So, this could be you, maybe taking your knees a little wider apart, adjusting your shape so that your left arm and ear or temple come all the way down to the floor. Or if you're a little tired of being on your knees, you could come down to do the same shape prone. And I'm going to use my blanket here to pad the bottom of my rib cage to my frontal hip points. I might use my right hand or my block to hold my forehead. So, one way or another, settling into some semblance of a one sided thread the needle. Left arm wrapping through underneath you, somewhere between your chest tissue and your collarbone. Palm up toward the ceiling. And the left shoulder blade now wrapping away from the spine and around your side ribs. Now, this time you're looking for the sensation to concentrate around the back of the left arm and maybe in the space between the shoulder blade and the spine. A very slight shift in location from our previous shape. And even once the body is outwardly still, you still have that sense of the internal ebb and flow of your breath. Almost as if you're breathing into the upper back left side of the lung as you breathe in, and then feeling that space soften and shrink as you breathe out. A sense of your attention very gently gathering a part of the body that is often forgotten or overlooked. As you become accustomed to being still, you might feel your head and your pelvis growing a little heavier. You might feel the breath moving with just a little bit more ease in that upper back left lung. And again, take a final couple of breaths here. One more breath into the back of the heart. Exhale it out. And then wherever you've had your right hand, set it underneath your ear or your temple and use that to lift you up just enough that you can unwind your left arm from underneath you. If you're still kneeling, this is a great time to come down to lie on the front of the body, either with a blanket or towel padding you or not. And then take both arms down by your sides. Reach your fingertips toward your feet. You might even clasp your hands behind you and then shrug your shoulders back and down. Now take a breath in here. You can lift your chest and your head if that helps you access the back and down movement through the shoulders. And then as you breathe out, let your head come back down toward the floor and your shoulders round and soften. Again, we'll do that a few more times. Inhale to shrug the shoulders back and down. Exhale to soften and round. Two more rounds. Reach the knuckles toward the heels one last time. Exhale to release. And then one more pose with that left arm. Stretch your left arm out wide at shoulder height, palm down toward the floor. You can even inch the hand a little closer toward the head end of the mat. Option one is a straight arm with palm down. Option two is to keep the upper arm where it is, but bend your elbow at 90 degrees. And then use your right hand under your right shoulder to start turning your rib cage away from that left arm toward the right side of the mat. You're aiming to turn enough that you generate a gentle stretch over the front of the left shoulder or in the left side of the chest. And that you can start to feel the left shoulder blade gliding a little closer to the spine. If you're not feeling it from turning your rib cage, you might turn your hips as well. And then once you've found a shape you think you can work with, get as relaxed about it as you can. Maybe you bend up through one of your knees and use that as a kickstand to lean into. Or maybe you take the top right leg and sweep it back behind you as a counterweight. If you're holding your head away from the floor, see if you can release it to drape down either onto a prop or your hand or down onto the floor. And once again, you find a shape that you think you can rest in with some level of comfort. Allow your body to settle into stillness. Tuning into the much more subtle internal ebb and flow of the breath, now in the left, right, in the left front portion of the lung. Using your in breath to inflate the left front ribs and the left side of the chest. And feeling those spaces soften as you breathe out. For many of us, it's a little easier to access the breath here in the chest than it was in the back ribs or even the side ribs where we started. But this can also be a place that we hold a lot of tension. That maybe there isn't the elasticity that we might find in other places. So knowing that this is the last shape that we'll make on the left side before moving on to the right, add to the mental snapshot that you created around your breath early on so that you're able to continue gathering information as practice continues. Once again, heading into your final couple of breaths here. And at the end of your next breath out, take your time unrolling your hips and your chest back down flat to the mat. Set both hands under your shoulders, create a little abdominal tone, and then use that to push the floor away and bring you back up to all fours. This time, set your wrists under your shoulders and your knees down under your hips. And take some big circles through your shoulder blades. Gather them up around your ears, back toward your spine, down toward the waist, around the side ribs. And then repeating those big, juicy circles. And as you do that, notice any differences between the left side and the right. Any sense of warmth, any difference in mobility or elasticity, or even just connection, awareness. And then settle the shoulder blades still, sweep your feet off to one side, and bring your sit bones down to the mat. As I said, we'll take a rebound between the two sides. So you could unroll down to lie flat on your back. I'm going to prop myself up on my two blocks. The first one, the one closest to me on its lowest height, I'm aiming for it to catch my thoracic spine and the bottom tips of my shoulder blades. The second one on its middle height, ready to hold the base of the head. You could drape back onto a folded up blanket or towel, a big cushion. You even roll up your mat if you're keen. And then you might extend out through your legs, reaching your heels toward the bottom corners of the mat. You could roll up the bottom of the mat to prop the backs of your knees. Or you could bend your knees and have your feet on the floor and your knees leaning gently toward each other. So, one way or another, find a shape that you're comfortable enough in to really settle. Arms a little wide from the sides of the body in a V shape. And if you can do so comfortably, turn your palms up toward the ceiling. Let the back of your body get heavy, your head, your pelvis, your elbows if they're on the floor, and then the knuckles on the backs of the hands. And once again, tune into differences between the left side and the right. Maybe one arm feels longer or heavier. Maybe one collarbone feels broader or softer. Maybe the breath feels different in the two halves of the rib cage. And often, as quickly as you notice those asymmetries, your body works to bring them back toward balance. And maybe the sharpness of those discrepancies dissolve a little as you stay here. Our last 4 or 5 breaths here, continuing to rest your attention on your upper body, your arms and shoulders, collarbones, and your rib cage. And with your last couple of breaths here, you might like to take your arms from their V shape out wide into a T shape or a cactus shape. You might even like to reach your arms overhead, your biceps by your ears, or if you're inclined, maybe even a little behind your ears. Take a lovely long breath in, reach, and then breathe out. Leave one of your arms overhead, whichever side you would prefer to roll to. Bend up through your knees if your legs are extended, and then roll off your props if you're on props onto one side. Use your top hand on the floor in front of you to ease you all the way back to an upright seat. And then let's head into that sequence on the second side with your starting snapshot of how the breath felt unaltered. And then your second snapshot of how the left side of the body felt compared to the right. Let's add to the picture that we're building of the upper body. So start in all fours and then widen your knees, maybe even as wide as your mat. Remember, your option is to send your hips all the way back to your heels or to keep your hips a little lifted in something more like puppy pose. But you do want the hips to act as a counterweight for the right hand as it stretches forward toward the front of the mat. I find that a little bit of gentle tension between the weight of your hips and the reach through your fingertips. And then get as comfortable as you can. Maybe the left elbow is out wide and the left hand is a cushion for the head. In order to move away from any sense of pinch or compression at the right side of the neck, maybe you take the hand wider. See if you can start to feel that subtle flaring through the right side ribs, that sense of elasticity over the right side of the armpit. And if you're not getting any of that sense of space there, you might walk your torso and your right hand a little closer to the left long edge of the mat. Maybe it feels better to turn the right palm toward the midline of the body. Also, let your elbows soften to rest on the floor. So, as usual in yin, use the beginning of your shape to get any wriggles out of the system. To find a shape that you can work with where you're aware of some sensation. The sensation is subtle enough that you're able to stay with it for a sustained time. And once you found that shape, let outward stillness settle over you and start to tune in to the much more subtle movement of the breath. And a sense of the movement not coming from conscious thought or the movement of your limbs, but the internal ebb and flow of the right lung. Start to tune into whatever movement you can sense in the right side ribs. A feeling of the in breath filling the spaces between the ribs. And those spaces softening to release and rebound with each breath out. Now take your last couple of breaths here. And if you walked your torso over toward the left, inch your way back to center. Use your left hand on the floor beneath you to ease you back up toward that all fours position. And then drive down more deliberately through the left hand to sweep your right arm out wide and up toward the ceiling. Now take an in breath there as you deliberately broaden out across your collarbones. And then breathe out to sweep the right arm through behind the left, threading the needle. 3 more rounds to rinse a little bit of life and movement back into the right arm and shoulder. 2 more. We'll do 1 more round. And just like on the first side, you might sweep the right arm through and then stay here, finding somewhere comfortable for your head and your shoulder, for your left hand, maybe widening your knees again. But if, as on the first side, you've had enough of that time on your knees, you might come down to lie on the front of the body instead. Now, again, I've got myself propped from my low ribs down to the frontal hip points. Pubic bone is heavy to create a little softening through the low back, space for my chest tissue in between the right arm and the right collarbone. And the right arm is turned palm up. Feel free to rest your head on your left hand or a prop. And again, get out any fidgets and wriggles. You could walk your feet out wide, let your heels roll in. Maybe it feels better to have your big toes closer and your heels rolling out. And then once your outward shape feels comfortable, start to hone in on the movement of the right shoulder blade, gliding away from the spine to wrap around the right side ribs. See if you can concentrate on the sensation around the back of the right upper arm. Or maybe concentrating between the right shoulder blade and the spine. This kind of forgotten and neglected region that we often can't even reach with our own hands. And see if you can use your breath to feel a little more connected with this forgotten space. And as you know, the right lung is a little larger than the left, thanks to the position of the heart nestled in above that left lung. And maybe you can feel that here. Maybe you can feel that slightly enhanced capacity. Now you have about 4 more leisurely breaths here. And you're feeling the space that you're creating between the inner edge of the right shoulder blade and the spine. And you're using the breath to create a little more elasticity in those upper back ribs. And of your next breath out, set your left hand down beside the left side of the head. Give the left hand some downward pressure. Lift yourself up just enough that you can unwind the right arm from underneath you and then reach both arms back along your sides. You could have your fingertips reaching toward your feet, or you could once again interlace your fingers, maybe the odd or awkward way. As you next breathe in, squeeze your shoulder blades back and down. Lift your chest and your head as little or as much as you like. And then breathe out to let the head and the shoulders droop. Inhale to lift, squeeze, and exhale to droop forward. Last 2 rounds. As you next lower down, you can release your hands. Set your left hand under your left shoulder and then sweep your right arm out wide. Right upper arm bone at shoulder height, or maybe a little closer to the head end of the mat. Either a straight arm with palm down or that 90-degree cactus bend through the elbow. Turning your rib cage as far to the left as you like to open up the right side of the chest and the front of the right shoulder. Maybe turning your hips as well. As always, wriggle around as much as you like. Adjust your props or the position of your left hand or your legs to see if you can find a shape you can drape yourself in. Maybe using one of your bent knees as a kickstand. Maybe using that top left leg back behind you as something of a counterweight. And once you've found something you can work with, relax your neck, drop your head. Let your body become outwardly still. Tuning into the much more subtle movement created internally by the ebb and flow of the breath. And this time focusing on the right front ribs, especially up high around the chest and the collarbones. One of those places that can get a little compressed or congested by our postural habits. Feel the right shoulder blade easing its way closer to the spine behind you. And then start to compare your sensation now with what you experienced on the first side, the left side. Maybe the two sides of the upper body are really similar, but much more likely they are different. There's so many ingrained unconscious habits around the ways that we use our two hands and therefore our two shoulders. So many asymmetries just built into daily life. Give yourself a final breath here to take in that snapshot, that final comparison of left side to right. And then take as much time as you like to ease the front of the body back down onto the mat. Set your hands under your shoulders, find a little tone through your abdomen, and use that to lift you back up to all fours. Now, one more time, take those big circles through the shoulder blades, up toward the ears, back toward the spine, down toward the waist, and over the side ribs. Maybe this time you swap directions, wrapping your shoulder blades around the side ribs, toward the waist, toward the spine, and then toward the ears. Noticing whether the two sides now feel more similar or also possible, more different. Take a final circle for the shoulder blades, and then sweep your feet to one side. And once again, bring your sit bones down and swing your legs out in front of you. And we're going to make our way down to lie on our backs, but if you have props around you, you might as well gather them within arm's reach in case you want them for the final phase of practice. When you're ready, then lower all the way down onto your back. You're welcome to extend out through your legs, or maybe it feels more comfortable to have your knees bent and your feet on the floor. And give yourself just a couple of breaths to create a little of that unwinding, a little of the rebound that we had after the first side. Tune into the positions of your two shoulder blades on the floor, your two elbows, your two sets of knuckles. Notice if one arm still feels longer or heavier or warmer or just more connected to the nervous system. Notice if the breath is moving in a similar way in the two halves of the rib cage. And then once again, take your arms out wide. Reach your arms overhead. Take a lovely long stretch. Bend up through your knees if they aren't bent already. And then keeping your left arm overhead, roll onto your, sorry, right arm overhead, roll onto your right side. Bend your right elbow to use that hand as a cradle for the back of the head. You can have your knees as close to your torso as you like. You might slide a block or a blanket between them. And we're going to focus on the left arm. So take your top left arm up toward the ceiling. Turn your palm toward the wall behind you. And then bend your elbow and sweep the back of your left hand behind you. Maybe it's resting around your sacrum or the right sacroiliac joint. Or maybe the back of the left hand is making its way a little higher up the spine towards your rib cage. Start pretty easy though. Set the inner edge of that left foot onto the floor, and then use the left foot to control your descent as you start to roll your rib cage down on top of that left hand. So left palm is down to the floor, left elbow on or close to the floor, and you're starting to roll your chest open toward the ceiling. Now, if you're already feeling something, either over the front of the left shoulder or in the left shoulder blade, then great, you can get comfortable and relax. If you're not feeling much, then you could roll out far enough to inch the left hand a little higher up your back, maybe toward the space between your shoulder blades, and then come back to turning your chest toward the ceiling. If you're still not feeling much, you could bring your hips with you, knees up toward the ceiling, sacrum a little flatter to the mat. And if you're still not feeling much, you could start to drift your bent knees over toward the left, adding a little bit of weight onto the left elbow and the left shoulder blade. And once again, find something that you can make peace with. And given that this is quite a weird position for the left arm, it doesn't have to be your fullest range of motion, but something that gives you the chance to refresh your usual patterns. And with your belly a little freer to move as you breathe, there's probably quite a bit of ebb and flow as you breathe there. Let's see if you can still notice what shifts and changes around your collarbones, around the shoulder blade, especially on the left side, and around the ribs again, especially on that left side. Last couple of breaths here. Now take as much time as you like to start to ease your way back toward your right hand side, coming just far enough to your right that you offload the left palm. And you can then slide the left arm out from underneath you. Maybe you're keen to stretch out the legs or create a little movement through the left hand or wrist. Maybe for you, it feels better to be still. Notice if anything's changed in the snapshot that you've been taking of how you feel in your upper body. Any sense of release or rebound down the length of that left arm. Any new information to receive in regard to your breath. When you're ready to move on, take your arms out wide. Reach your arms overhead, bend up through your knees if they aren't bent already. Then keep your left arm overhead as you roll onto your left hand side. Bend your elbow and use your hand to cradle the back or the side of your head. Right arm up toward the ceiling. Right palm turns toward the wall behind you. And then bend your elbow and drape your right hand behind you. Back of the hand against the surface of your back body. Now again, maybe you start low around the sacrum or the low back. Maybe you're inching a little closer to your rib cage, but be gentle. Set the inner edge of the right foot down onto the floor and use that as a brake to control your descent as you make your way down to lying on that right arm and elbow, turning your chest in the general direction of the ceiling. And if you can feel the bottom tip of the shoulder blade kind of jabbing into the floor, see if you can engage the muscles on the back of the body just enough to flatten that bottom tip of the shoulder blade a little more against your back ribs. Now, if you're already feeling some semblance of sensation over the front of the shoulder or in the shoulder blade, you are welcome to stay put. If you're not feeling much, you might roll just far enough to your left that you can reposition the right hand a little higher up the back, a little closer to your shoulder blades. Maybe that's enough, or maybe you start to turn your pelvis too, sacrum toward the floor, knees toward the ceiling. Maybe even add the weight of the knees, drifting over toward the right. And once you've wriggled around enough to find a shape that you can work with, settle into stillness. And see if you can feel the quality and the intensity of the sensation change. Now, with your last few breaths here, notice how you feel now compared to how you felt on the first side. Notice also any information you've gained from this somewhat forgotten or mysterious part of the body. Shoulders and the arms so often taken for granted. And take a last breath or two here. And then take as much time as you like to start easing your weight back toward the left. Far enough to the left that you can offload the right hand, slide the right arm out from underneath you. Once again, tuning into whether it feels better to rest still, or whether you feel like a little circle through the right wrist, or engaging the tissues around the right arm, moving through the right shoulder. When you are ready, Shavasana awaits. Not a long one, very much like our previous rebound shapes, long enough to tune into the changes that we've created and the bridge of awareness that we've built. So, once again, get comfortable. Let the back of your body lean into the floor. Feel the weight of your skull and your sacrum, your shoulder blades, your elbows, and your knuckles. And feel the elasticity, the pliability that you've created around all four sides of the rib cage. Ease your arms back out wide. Stretch your arms out above your head. Take a lovely long fingers to toes stretch. And then bend your knees and curl them in towards you, reaching down with your hands to catch hold. And make your way back up to that comfortable upright seat. Back to whatever position you started in today. Finishing with that central position for the pelvis. Stacking the rib cage directly on top. Stacking the weight of the head on top of that. Letting your arms hang heavy and your shoulder blades rest on your back ribs. And taking a final point of comparison, comparing the pace, the depth, the texture, and the quality of your breathing now to how you felt at the beginning of practice. And blink your eyes open or refocus your gaze. Hopefully, you feel the same sense of mobility and elasticity around the rib cage that I do. take that out with you to breathe a little more freely through the rest of your day or evening, whatever lies ahead. Bring your hands to pray, your thumbs at your heart. Bow your chin to acknowledge your practice and any insights gained there. And as always, I leave you with my thanks for your presence and your practice today. If you're here with me in person, as always, you're welcome to jump into the chat to let me know how it felt for you. Maybe if any interesting differences came up between the two sides. I noticed particularly in that last uh, Gomokasana twist, a big asymmetry between my right side and my left. If you have a little more time, you might even come back down to Shavasana, take a little longer to revel in the changes that you've created. Or maybe take a breath practice, a pranayama practice to really highlight the mobility you've created in the rib cage. Well, my apologies for my croaky voice. It was definitely an interesting one. I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your day or your evening and hopefully see you next time.